Hi, everybody. Welcome to Change's Roundtable for today. We're joined here with Rob, and I'm Steph from Australia. And it's a pleasure to have you all with us. Um, and there's been a slight change of plans, but that's how diabetes is. Um, but we'll continue the conversation and we'll talk about diabetes education and the evolution of education with our diabetes management. So, Rob, thank you for joining us today um, over in the US of A. Um, Now, let's start from the very beginning and talk about your education when you were first diagnosed with diabetes. How old were you, and did you have much of a say in what you got taught?
Hey, Steph, thanks. And great to see you here on the roundtable. And couldn't be happier to be working with you with the Beta Change team. We also have Katie Doyle behind the scenes working the magic and keeping everything running here. So thank you, Katie. Important topic today, education. How was I diagnosed? What was that like? And what's education been like for me, for you, for Stephanie since then? So for your question, to answer that directly, so I was 3 years old. And how on earth would you educate a child that's 3 years old that's just diagnosed with diabetes? So I remember the first day I was diagnosed. It was the first cognitive memory that I have in this beautiful world. And I remember walking into the hospital with my mom and my dad, and we were in Colorado. And all I remember from that time was, my parents putting a needle into a Raggedy Ann doll, into a doll, practicing how to deliver insulin via shot. And that was back in 1990, 1991. And really with the technology not there, I mean, that was all I remember. And for a 3-year-old, you can't teach the tactics of properly managing your diabetes. For me, the education was secondary to the emotion that I felt. And for many people with type 1 diabetes diagnoses, and even with people with type 2, I mean, there's so much emotional, so many emotional moments and struggles and challenges that are going through their minds at that time, that how can you possibly put that aside and actually break this down logically? Like, what do I need to do to properly manage this thing that was just thrown at me out of nowhere? So for me, it was really educating my parents. My parents were the ones that were educated. And, to be quite honest, it was just keeping me happy and keeping me smiling as best they could while I was in the hospital. So education for me was through my parents for those early parts of my diabetes diagnosis and the years that came after. But how about you, Stephanie? What was your diagnosis like, and what was the education for you, and how was that delivered for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would resonate with your story, Rob, because I guess mine is very similar. I was diagnosed at 10 years old. So at least I kind of knew what was going on, but at the same time, I'd never heard of diabetes before in my life. So a big shock for myself, a big shock for my family. My parents were my number one. But I was doing all the needles and finger pricking from the get-go. So I took on that responsibility at the very beginning.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a huge learning curve. And I guess the hospital staff were very, I don't know, I guess they did very well because I'm still taking my needles at the moment, which is a plus. Um, but it was also a lot of education for my family as well, because they were, obviously supporting me all through my teen years as well. So for them, for my family to understand what I was going through, they needed a lot of support as well. So it was a combination of, seeing doctors, but also understanding what diabetes is like to live with, which is, you can't really be taught that. You just kind of have to experience it, and I guess connect with your social circles to really, I don't know, make it less of a burden, I guess you would say.
Yeah, experience
Yeah.
is the best teacher, as they say, and that's experiential learning. And a quick question for you. So you were 10, you clearly remember that day vividly, all the emotions that you were feeling. How hard was that to take all of those in while trying to take on all of this other knowledge about this new condition that you had to now live with? I mean, was the emotional barriers a challenge to ultimately understanding what you needed to do?
Oh, absolutely. Like it's hard to really put it into words, but basically you're, as everyone would know, like taking needles every day, multiple times a day, it's daunting. And it's, I guess in a way, you just have to overcome all those fears and all those worries, and all that emotional side. You have to kind of build on that to get the job done. You have to check your blood sugars, make sure they're okay. Like, because at the end of the day, you're number one, and if your health can't keep up with you, well, then you're in for a bad time, really.
Yeah. And and to that point, so I mean, there's obviously this transition of how we are being educated from 3 to 10 to 12 to 15, 20, 30, 40, 50. What was that transition like for you? And especially as as it relates to those emotions, was there ever like a pivot in how you use those emotions and taking those emotions actually into play to benefit you and your diabetes? And also, how was that transition for you growing up?
Yeah, growing up, it was difficult to understand what was going on, say just in life, but also with diabetes as well. Like teenage years, it's a mixture of everything. And I found my transition, it was okay, but it was also very confusing. Um, in terms of my diabetes management, it definitely evolved, and the education and the tools that I needed, um, to live my life well with diabetes, it was hard. It was hard to come across those tools and actually understand what it meant at that time,
Hmm.
because I didn't want to do anything with my diabetes. I just wanted to take my insulin, get enough blood sugars down in my logbook, and then that's it. I can give that to my doctor and they can sort it out.
Right.
But and I think quite a few people would be in the same boat, because yeah, things are happening at school, everything, life goes on.
Yeah, I was there.
um, yeah.
Yeah.
um, but I think the transition phase is like, it's really hard through teen years.
Hmm.
um, and I think it's also very hard to know what information you need,
Hmm.
as your life changes through those years. um, I'm not sure about you, Rob, but did you find that difficult too?
Yeah, so again, a little different for me, and it should be. Everybody's different. We have our own diagnosis stories and the time that we were diagnosed, and yeah, just like life, everybody's life is so different, and our lifestyles are different, and just like life evolves, the education needs to evolve with it, or else it's going to be irrelevant. It's not going to be timely or accurate or beneficial for us people living with chronic conditions. So for me, there was a point where I was in my early mid-teens, and I was going to my endocrinologist with my mother and my father at times, and I just didn't get that much from it because they were educating my mother. I got indirect education. My mother was the one passing that down to me. And while diabetes camp was hugely important for my growth as a person managing diabetes, and I went to camp pretty early on, you know, I just didn't get that much out of those visits because it wasn't that important to me at the time, because it wasn't directed towards me. It was directed towards my mother. And that's why we hear of diabetes, especially type 1 for younger people, being this, family condition, and this condition that the burden is held on by not the individual, and the ownership is not necessarily there. So there's this really important time for people who are diagnosed early on to transition that, ownership, to transition that knowledge, to transition those needs and the tactics that are needed to be taken to be successful in managing this long term. So for me, it was that transition from one doctor to the next. And I remember the doctor I went into when I was about 15, 16 years old. The first thing he did was he told my mom, I'm going to talk to Rob here, and it'd be great, be great to catch up with you after, but I need to talk to Rob one-on-one. And I remember that was like the first thing I remember. I was like, wow, like this is what I wanted. This is maybe not what I thought I needed and what I thought would best benefit me at that time, but it was exactly what I needed, because I needed to take that ownership on myself, because as much as I love my family, they're far away now. They're not at my side like they were when I was 3. They're not waking me up in the middle of the night to help check my blood and to give me shots and to help manage my diabetes. This is on my own, and I need that ownership. So that transition, that evolution of education was hugely important for me, as it is for many people with diabetes. And I've actually felt that transition again. And we talk about this not just in a one stagnant moment, but it's a very, very much long-term dynamic, evolution of lifestyle, of our lives. And from where I was 10 years ago as a, 16, 17-year-old to where I am today, I need something totally different. And I need a different design and approach and delivery of education to be personal to me, personalized to my lifestyle, to be personalized to whatever I need to do to properly manage it. So, yeah, as life evolves, so does the education. And I'm curious, Steph, as we learn every day and as we, adapt every day and as life changes every day, what are your thoughts on education, not just shifting from this direct and indirect to direct model, but, what are we doing today to best approach education with people with diabetes and chronic conditions? You could even say educating people about healthcare and healthcare literacy, and where can we make the biggest impact to personalize that? Because for me, I'm lucky if I get a doctor's appointment every 4 months, and it's about 30 minutes. And there's only so much time for my doctor to give me that education. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do we evolve education and personalize education, not just with diabetes, but with healthcare, to best fit the current moment?
Oh, I think that's the money maker, Rob. But before I answer that, I just want to touch on what you mentioned before, about, when you were growing up, you went to diabetes camps, and that really empowered you through that transition, because that was relevant information for your age group, for your capabilities. And then also getting empowered again by having a doctor that responded directly with you. Yeah, I've experienced similar things, and it's a game changer, really. And I guess, yeah, moving on to your question now, I think that's a hard question to answer, and I think it comes down to communication. I think as a person living with type 1, I want to know all the information that's out there. But if I learn about that, it doesn't necessarily mean that my management will improve. So I think it's really trying to pick out the information that's relevant to me. But how do you do that? It's so hard.
It's like you're given this encyclopedia. There's all of these tools. There's all of this education. There's all of these resources. It's like, here's the encyclopedia to manage your diabetes well. Good luck. And it's like,
good luck.
What about me? Like that's for like the general population. How do we personalize that? How do we give me the bite-sized and digestible pieces of information when I need it most, and not just every 4 months, and to some degree that it might not apply to me?
Yeah, I think something that powerful that I've experienced recently is, taking on the role, not taking on the role, but trying to understand my diabetes more thoroughly. So I've, personally tried to interpret my own data that I'm collecting every day with my blood sugars, and how different foods react to my body and everything. Like, I'm trying to understand how to improve my management in between my doctor visits.
Yeah.
It's hard because every day is different. All the graphs are going crazy. I don't know. But I think that might be an area where we can improve. If we can learn how to manage ourselves, our diabetes, like a diabetes educator, perhaps, we might be able to have a better understanding, have a better enjoyment of life with diabetes, and also understand what's going on in our own bodies, rather than say, like you said before, waiting that 4 months for your doctor's appointment to only see them for 10, 15 minutes, and let them do that interpretation.
Yeah.
Um,
And you and I mean, let's be honest, we're very, very lucky to even have access to those people where we have that family around us to support us, to help educate us growing up. And we have the, clinicians around us now and even friends around us now to support us. We have each other. But there are so many people that just don't have that. And for them, how do you find that empowerment to self-manage and self-educate and really self-inspire to do what you said, taking this education on yourself? And this is a journey. We're all on our journeys here with life as it relates to diabetes and other facets of our lives, healthcare or not. How do we become empowered to take that on and take that ownership on? It's a challenge here of the 21st century, and I hope the digital age can bring more insights and can help educators best support and help us as people living with this every day to provide personalized, relevant information at the right time. So
it's so important. And I think, as you said, like everyone has their diabetes healthcare team, or they should envision to have one. And I think it's always a two-way street. It's not just us managing our diabetes and being told how to do it or encouraged one way or another. It's a discussion. It's an open discussion about what's new, what am I potentially, doing incorrectly, or, getting that feedback in a timely, relevant manner, so that, I don't know, sometimes I go to my doctor's appointments and I feel like I'm wasting their time, because they're not, involved with me. But it's a tricky one, because it also comes down to motivation. And I don't know, diabetes is so hard to keep motivated all the time. So I think, improving your understanding of diabetes, as you grow, it keeps you interested in what's actually happening, and also puts you in a position to support others that might be needing some help or just some guidance.
That's really interesting. And we have a few comments here from our followers asking about, being our own advocates, especially in those healthcare settings. How do we stay motivated? That's such a personalized question that, it's, again, how do you break down that encyclopedia of what to do? And it's really a challenge that we're going to have to face here in the next couple of years. By the way, I apologize. I am here in Chicago, and so you might hear some sirens, but to recap, Steph, I'm curious, of your overall perspective of education with diabetes. How can we best be educated? Sorry, it's very loud outside. How can we best be educated about our own diabetes? How can we empower others? How can we support one another as it relates to education? And ultimately, how do we evolve education to adapt to our evolving lives? Because the education I received when I was 3, 10, 20, and today is so different. That how do we meet that education at the point where it's relevant?
Oh boy. Oh, you're asking all the good questions today, Rob. And I think, motivation, having that interest in living a good life with diabetes, I don't know, keeping supported, having that support network. We got to keep it up, because really, once we start, having that aspect for ourselves, we can easily pass it on to others, and also start sharing that with, society, those that aren't necessarily involved in the diabetes community. But education, it's a hard one. And there's always those different, cultural influences as well. So.
Yeah, and to close out, first I would love to hear about other stories, and I know that we were really interested about understanding, what others have gone through. I mean, we are two people in, situations that are very much privileged and very lucky to have all of these resources around us. And yet there's still so many challenges. So, I mean, you break it down to, where you were located when you were diagnosed and, those around you when you were diagnosed. I mean, everybody's situation is so different. So we'd love to hear back from our followers and our membership. I mean, how are you being educated today? Where are the biggest gaps that you're seeing in your own education about diabetes? And what are your thoughts on how we can improve that? Because, the topic here is, how do we access education, but how do we keep education evolving to meet our evolving lifestyles and our evolving lives? So we'd love to hear from you. And thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate the conversation today. It's been an awesome one. Education is one of the most important topics. It's one of our key strategic pillars at Beta Change. And it's something that we're going to be investigating more thoroughly, just like you're investigating your diabetes more thoroughly, and as many are, over the coming months and over the coming years, because education is something that will ultimately be the driver of patient empowerment and empowering people to take on a successful management of their diabetes and living a long, happy, and healthy life. So thank you for sharing everything today, and really excited to continue this discussion in the future. Any other follow-up or closing remarks from you?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks for the discussion, Rob. I think it's a really, really important topic and a good discussion point. And I guess maybe if you're having trouble with, or you want to learn some new things, just discuss it with your healthcare team. Ask for the information. Don't be scared, because, you never know what you might learn, and you might actually find something really interesting that, you might not have known before. So, every day is a learning experience with diabetes. It's crazy. So, yeah, take the time to rest as well.
And for those that, and really for those that don't have that access to that education, those that don't have access to that clinician or that, support, reach out to us. We want to be there for you. We want to be, your companion on this journey of diabetes. We have our experiences. Our followers and our members have our experiences and their experiences. So feel free to reach out to us at any time. We want to be supportive of you and share our education and our experience and our perspective, and also learn what your perspective is, so you can share that with others as well. So follow us at our website. We're at betachange.org, also on Twitter at betachange. And thank you for joining us today on the topic of education. We're going to continue this one. Thank you to Katie Doyle again for working behind the scenes to make us look good. And Stephanie, thank you for everything, and really, really excited to be working with you at Beta Change. And thank you for everything you shared today.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Likewise.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and have a great weekend.
See you.